Hi, this book talk is dealing with 4 novels that I'm going to be using in my Lit Circles with My Novels class, which is comprised mostly of 11th and 12th graders. The thematic unit for Read 750 is responsibility and tolerance, but these novels have a common coming-of-age theme. It's more of a personal responsibility. I know you've all been teenagers, some of you have teenagers, some of us work with teenagers, so I decided that you can't really develop a tolerance for others if you don't really understand yourself. So to start off my thematic unit, we're going to be talking about ourselves in order to build up some sort of responsibility and a tolerance for others. So these books all deal with finding yourself and finding your place in the world. The first book that I have is called The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven, and it's a book by Sherman Alexie. It's a collection of short stories which are centered around the life of Native Americans on a Spokane Indian reservation. Some of the stories are centered around a character named Victor Joseph, who's really bitter about his childhood experiences that he had on the reservation, and also his attempts to find a place in white man's civilization. Some of the stories are told from first-person perspective, and others from a third-person omniscient, and some are centered around Victor's friends on the reservation. So it's a really good way for me to discuss various literary elements also. Each of the stories is a little bit different, but a common theme is pretty much a desire to rise above the norm on the reservation while still trying to embrace their native roots that they have. Community ties are fading for some of the boys, and some of them are really trying to cling to their heritage and try to keep it alive, and this is the struggle that they must overcome. Another book that I'm going to be using for Lit Circles is called Brothers and Keepers, and it's a story by John Edgar Wiedemann, and it's also a nonfiction book. The first one was, it is a fiction and it's short story collections. So this one is nonfiction. And the central question in the book is how 2 brothers who are raised in the same environment, in this case a black neighborhood in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and how they can end up having such different lives. One of them is a Rhodes Scholar, a college professor, and an acclaimed author, and that would be John. And the other brother is a drug addict who his big dreams are to be a big-time dealer, and who is now serving a life sentence. So Wiedemann brings out his own family into the forefront, and he gives the reader a lot of things to think about, and he wrestles with himself about whether he should absolve his brother from responsibilities for the choices that he made and that many other young black men make. He wonders if it's his fault that his brother went the way that he did and if he should have done more. But ultimately he decides that, it's the choices that we make, and, they both had the same upbringing, and yet they chose very different paths for each other. He also makes a case for the forces in society to kind of limit African American males' choices, so he makes a little case for that too. And he's really not sure if he should have been responsible or to have been his brother's keeper. The third book is called A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, and other than I really like the title, and it kind of sticks with you, and I end up finding myself saying it over and over again. But anyway, it's a story by Dave Eggers, and it's also kind of a memoir. It's a part memoir, part nonfiction, because he does add a lot of fantasy elements in it, in how he tries to deal with the issues that he has. The story is essentially Dave, who in his early 20s, each of his parents suddenly dies from cancer within 3 months of each other. He has 3 siblings, 2 of whom are older and already have lives of their own. And Dave is left to care for his 8-year-old brother Christopher, who he then refers to as Toph. So this is Dave's struggle with his approach to trying to figure out how to parent Toph. First, he thinks he's being a really brilliant parent by just basically letting Toph have free reign and thinking it's making him so well adjusted. But then he starts worrying about that his whole hands-off approach is really making him maladjusted, and he struggles with himself trying to lead a normal life because he is a young adult and he wants to have a life, and he's finding himself at odds with his own thoughts about he wants to be selfish, and then he knows he has to have this responsibility. And due to his parents' death and his duty to take care of Toph, he feels kind of robbed of his youth, and this kind of fuels he gives himself permission to do some fairly irresponsible things. And And as I said before, he fictionalizes parts of it to bring the surreal elements of his life kind of into more focus and give the reader a little bit more understanding into his thought process. And basically this whole book is his struggle to find himself while he's taking the responsibility of raising his younger brother. And the last book that I have is called The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and it's by Stephen Chbosky. And it's a story of a teenager who goes by the alias, his name is Charlie. And he describes various scenes of his life by writing a series of letters to an anonymous person. And he doesn't know this person personally, he just starts writing letters to him. And it explores topics like introversion and awkward times of adolescence. So you can see that, you know, he starts writing off, "Dear friend," and he writes pretty lengthy letters, and he always signs them "Love Always Charlie." So the whole book is told in a series of letters, and you get to know Charlie pretty well that way. The story is set in Charlie's freshman year in high school. He's a very unconventional type of thinker, and when the story begins, he's very shy and unpopular because of these things, and it follows his progression as he figures out who he is and finding himself. This book has very frequently been described as a modern-day Catcher in the Rye, which is why I actually ended up running across it, because I'm teaching Catcher in the Rye in my novels class right now. So I thought this would be a great addition to the curriculum to kind of see a more modern version of Holden Caulfield, if you will. So I would give this book talk at the start of the quarter in novels. I'd let students write down their choices for which novels they'd like to read by ranking them, and then I'd place them in different lit circles. I plan on having them pretty much decide their schedule of how much they'd like to read each day. I'll give them a certain amount of time in which they have to have the novel read, and this way that they'll really have to be accountable to themselves and their group. I would also let them assign their own roles within the lit circle, again giving them ownership of the group. I will then provide class time to read and class time to meet in their lit circle, so they wouldn't need to do that outside of class. Yes, I realize that all the protagonists in these 4 books are male, and I did that rather purposefully because I really want to make sure that I have a mixed group in the lit circles, because I figured if I chose 2 books with female protagonists and 2 books with males, all the boys would want one and all the girls would want another, and I really wanted to get a nice mix in there. So for this first lit circle, it is all focused on males. The next one, I would assume I would maybe do female, or maybe I would end up mixing, depending on, you know, once they got the hang of the whole lit circle thing. So, because I was thinking, boys in general tend to be your more reluctant readers, so I figured if I could grab them with this very first lit circle, we might have a little bit more success with getting them to read the other ones. So, that's my book talk. I hope it wasn't too horrible for you. If there's any questions, I will look forward to seeing your posts. Thanks.